Tonight,
it's been so hot.
Hundreds still unaccounted for. Recovery crews sifting through the ash in Maui work to find and identify human remains in Hawaii's devastating wildfires. And all eyes on Iowa.
Wow, snap back to reality.
Candidates from both sides of the aisle taking to the Soapbox to make their 2024 pitches. Plus,
it's coming back in a big way.
Box office blockbusters fuel a return to faith-based films. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The deadliest fire on American soil in more than a century. From the CBN headquarters tonight in Virginia Beach, I'm John Jessup. Well, as people in Maui process the disaster at their doorstep, aid and intercession are pouring in. We've learned that the warning sirens on the island failed to activate, but the devastation has triggered a wave of prayers. Now with 90 deaths confirmed and more expected, government officials are also calling for accountability over the emergency response. CBN's Hillary Powell joins us now with tonight's top story. Hillary, there are some harrowing stories coming from these survivors.
That's right, John. The Lahaina blaze is now the deadliest fire emergency in modern U.S. history. Hawaii's governor warns he unfortunately expects more people to be found dead in the rubble. Search crews right now are going street by street through the neighborhoods affected, where the flames spread as fast as a mile a minute across the ground on Tuesday. Residents want safety officials to know the horrific ways they escaped and survived. Blackened, burned out homes and charred car shells, signs of harrowing escapes from wildfires in Hawaii neighborhoods where survivors say they had no warnings.
I ran out of the car and ran for my life, ran down to the ocean. I was only a quarter mile from the ocean, and they stayed in their car. They died with their dogs and everything. 3 of my friends in one car and 2 dogs died.
The Hawaii Emergency Management Agency confirms none of the island's comprehensive siren systems were ever activated, a logistical failure FEMA is now addressing.
There's going to be plenty of time for us to go back and learn some lessons from how the initial event unfolded, but we really need to stay focused right now on making sure that they have accurate information on what resources are available.
The circumstance was greatly complicated also by the heat and the speed with which the fire spread, destroying a great deal of infrastructure. Over time, we'll be able to figure out if we could have better protected people.
Toxic debris in hard-hit Lahaina means 200 hotel employees like J.P. Mayoga are squeezing into hotel rooms with family members.
Safer than it is at home right now. You know, being the air quality, the water situation. It's really the water is not good right now, obviously. And here we got running water. Now we got electricity.
CBN's Operation Blessing has arrived in Hawaii and is working with Youth with a Mission to get much-needed supplies to those in need. Samaritan's Purse is also responding with aid. Churches ministered to the grieving Sunday. The Samasoni family lost 4 family members in the fire, but are remaining firm in their faith.
Just have to look to the Lord. You just trust in Him. His master plan always works the best. He has a purpose for us.
Obviously a lot of emotion, and as survivors continue to pick up and clean up, check in on loved ones, FEMA officials are asking people to keep phone lines clear. They're saying text rather than to call in areas with cell service. People can register for disaster assistance at www.disasterassistance.gov. John?
All right, Hillary Powell reporting. Thank you so much, Hillary. Well, Luther Harrison is the Vice President of North American Ministry for Samaritan's Purse. As Hillary reported earlier, they do have a team in Hawaii helping victims of the wildfire. Luther, right before the show, you mentioned that you have been with Samaritan's Purse for 27 years, that you were there to help with the flooding a few years ago. How does this compare to other disasters in your 27 years of serving?
Well, John, this is one of the heartbreak situations we face. I mean, here we are for a ministry of presence. Imagine when Job went through everything, he lost everything, and his friends came to be with him, didn't know what to say, but they just stood by his side. We're here to stand by the side of the residents here in Maui. And they may not be blood relatives, but they're ohana, they're family to each other. And just coming in, you hear the grief going through the families. Even a waitress this morning, just you see tears puddling up in her eyes saying, you know, I'm just waiting to hear what the fate of my family members that are still missing will be. And we're here as a ministry of presence to show them our love, our support. There's some strong, healthy churches here on this island, and we're partnering with these pastors to show what can we do to minister to their, not only their physical needs, but their spiritual and emotional needs as well. We want to just show them that God loves them and hasn't forgotten them.
You know, as you were talking, we were rolling some of the video of the devastation, just horrifying scenes. What are some of the biggest needs that people have that have been affected by the fires? You talked about the Ministry of Presence, of course, helping with emotional support, but we're talking about loss of life and loss of livelihood.
Well, as we look at this today, we were in Paradise, California for that fire where 85 families lost their lives in that one, and this is blown by that one with numbers we couldn't even imagine. But this is going to be a long-term recovery. It's going to be a long-term to get these families back into a home and get them back to just a sense of normalcy in a new way, and trying to minister to them and show them the church should have the responsibility to walk by them and just show them that we're here to help. We're not going to abandon you. We're not going to leave you or forsake you. That God's going to see them through. And you always hear the verse, out of the ashes, he will restore the crown of beauty. Well, we're here to help restore that crown of beauty in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely, and we so appreciate you being there. Luther, a final question for you. When disaster strikes, often aid rushes right in, but what about the weeks, months, and even years ahead? How can you help equip communities to continue ministering once Samaritan's Purse leaves?
Well, tomorrow we have our DC-8. We'll be flying from Greensboro, North Carolina to here with supplies and equipment. We don't want to be a drain to the local hardware stores. These families are going to be hitting them pretty hard, and we don't want to pull things off the shelves that they need. So we come in self-contained, self-sufficient. We're bringing the tools, equipment, supplies to get in, whether it's just sifting and looking at what can the church do to fill more of the gaps and the voids for ministering to these families. Whether it's food, whether it's hygiene kits, whether it's food supply items and kitchen items, different things.
Right.
So this is a war zone when you see this whole area of the fire, and these families just don't know where to go. But we just need to.
Luther, we are going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Again, Luther Harrison with Samaritan's Purse. We appreciate your time and the ministry that you are providing.
Thank you. Everyone, please pray for these families.
From a buttered cow to a corn kernel presidential poll, we're on the campaign trail at the Iowa State Fair right after this. Welcome back. From one term as president to 3 criminal cases against him, a new 4th indictment against Donald Trump could come as soon as Tuesday. A grand jury met today to decide on charging the current GOP frontrunner with interfering in the 2020 election in Georgia. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis has led a multi-year investigation into the allegations. They were sparked in part by a phone call from then-President Trump. In it, Trump appeared to pressure Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, to find the votes needed to win back the White House in 2020. In a social media post today, the former president called the prosecuting DA a phony, adding that he, quote, did not tamper with the election. Well, editor and publisher of Inside, I'm sorry, I went to the wrong story. Legal drama did not stop Mr. Trump from hitting the campaign trail over the weekend. He joined other presidential hopefuls to stump at the Iowa State Fair, while polls show President Joe Biden and Donald Trump holding big leads. CBN White House correspondent Abigail Robertson spoke with some voters who think the races are closer than the numbers may appear.
Every 4 years, the annual Iowa State Fair turns into a destination for political tourists. People come from all across the country to meet, hear, and maybe even flip a pork chop alongside candidates vying for their support in the presidential election.
Those in the crowded GOP field did their best to stand out, with Vivek Ramaswamy even wooing voters by rapping his favorite walkout song.
The clock's run out, time's up, over, plow, snap back to reality.
Candidates from both sides stumped from the famous Soapbox, and a few Republicans joined Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds for a fairside chat.
I've had enough of the swamp imposing its will on us. Now it's the time we, the people, impose our will on it.
But GOP frontrunner Donald Trump paved his own path at this year's fair.
More importantly than anything right now, I guess we're up 50 points in Iowa, 5-0.
Arriving with an entourage of 9 Florida congressmen who endorsed him over Ron DeSantis.
We are going to take care of our country. We are going to take care of Iowa. And you're going to be proud of our country again.
Trump fans taunted his opponents around the fair. They tried to drown out DeSantis' chat with Governor Reynolds with cowbells and whistles and chanted Trump as he worked the grill at the famous pork tent. Mike Pence was jeered at a few times during speeches.
You're a traitor!
And a few young men held a sign behind Nikki Haley reading, "Eat a corn dog, you coward." Around the political soapbox, CBN News spoke to multiple Republican voters who cast doubts about Trump's resounding lead in the polls.
I think it's time to look beyond President Trump. He did great things for this country, but it's time to move forward and look to the next generation of Republican leaders.
I don't put a lot of faith in polls. I don't think he's as far ahead as what the polls are making him to be.
Many raise concerns about the tone coming from the former president and if he's electable in a general election.
I like Donald Trump and I totally support his policies, but for some reason, just to say his name to people, they seem to have just a crazy reaction, like a visceral reaction to the point where it concerns me that he would never be able to win.
I think maybe God's taken away his protection.
While Democratic frontrunner President Joe Biden doesn't plan to make a stop at this year's fair, his 2 opponents both attended.
Today, 57% of the people in this country are not making enough money to pay for basic human needs.
With voters telling CBN News they wish Democrats were holding primary debates too.
We should welcome debates. Conversations, debating one another is where truth is found and where new ideas are birthed.
GOP candidates will continue to blitz the Hawkeye state until Iowa's First in the Nation caucus in January. But Democrats are shaking up their primary calendar next year and won't head to the polls until South Carolina at the start of February. Reporting from Iowa, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Looks like fun. Thank you, Abby. Now I've got my bearings right. Editor and publisher of Inside Elections and a Faith Nation contributor, Nathan Gonzalez, is here for more on the 2020 election. Nathan, maybe we'll get your overall impression of the fair and stumping in just a moment, but I want to ask you specifically about Ron DeSantis. We saw that he got booed when he was speaking at the fair. People were trying to disrupt his conversation with Governor Reynolds. He's also seen staffing shakeups and lower than expected polling numbers. What is your thoughts about his campaign? Is there enough time for him to turn things around?
Well, at first, I think we have to say that it's been underwhelming. I mean, maybe he's a victim of his own expectations that as the governor of Florida and winning re-election by such a large margin, that he came in with very high expectations, and he has not performed that well so far. I think some of them have been unforced errors, but also we've seen that Trump continues to be popular with Republican primary voters. Iowa is very interesting because Trump continues to be in the lead, but DeSantis has chosen to try to collect state endorsements from dozens of state legislators around the state and try to build this grassroots effort that at some point should be showing up in the polls, but has not come to fruition just yet.
You talked about some of those Iowa folks, and I know he was recently endorsed by Iowa Kingmaker Steve Deese. I want to turn to President Trump and some of those legal troubles and another likely indictment that's anticipated this week. The previous 3 haven't really done much to change his lead in the polls. Nathan, is Teflon Don a nickname you think will stick around for the former president throughout this campaign?
Well, at least through the primary, until proven otherwise. I don't know why, if indeed an indictment out of Georgia comes down, why this would be the one that would cause people who have stayed with him so far to be, well, that was too much. I think that it will go into the same basket of these investigations. They're just out to get him, and they continue to be on his side. And it will be interesting to see if the same dynamic happens where some of Trump's opponents defend the president against these legal charges, even though they're running against him, trying to capture the nomination from him. And that's a dynamic that we've been seeing for months now.
Interesting dynamic indeed. We just have a little less than a minute left, but I want to ask you, so the Hill has this recent headline that reads, GOP sees turnout disaster without Trump. Nathan, do you think Republican voters will be motivated to get to the polls for a candidate other than Donald Trump?
That's key for those who Republicans who want to turn the page from Trump. If he is not the nominee, then I think there should be concern among Republicans, because the former president is going to say that the system's rigged and don't turn out to vote. And if only a few percentage points of Republicans don't turn out in a general election, that would be very difficult for the Republican nominee to win key battleground states.
Nathan, if we had more time, I would ask you about Vivek Ramaswamy's rapping. We can maybe do that at another time, or even get you to rap. Nathan Gonzalez.
No one wants that, John.
Are you sure? Nathan Gonzalez with Inside Elections. We always appreciate your time and insights. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks, John.
Holy Hollywood. Coming up, a look at the booming market of faith-based films capturing the industry's attention, and what's next for Christian entertainment. Movies like Jesus Revolution and Sound of Freedom have made headlines for their surprising successes at the box office. That's fueling growing excitement over the future of faith-based family entertainment. CBN's Billy Hallowell spoke with industry leaders to find out how they got to this point and what's next.
While Hollywood seems to focus on franchises, reboots, and R-rated content to resurrect audience numbers, faith and family-friendly entertainment is reaching new heights. Movie Guide founder Dr. Ted Baer says this hasn't always been the case because Tinseltown has a checkered history presenting biblical content.
It's coming back in a big way. So we're actually, the first Christian movies, the first Passion Play was 1897. So then there were 3 in 1898. So they go in waves.
Rich Peluso, head of Sony's Christian arm of Firm Films, agrees, saying those waves often led to washouts.
When motion pictures first started, most of the content being created was biblical in nature because it was a commonly understood IP, right? Intellectual property. And then we saw the second wave kind of in the 50s and 60s with kind of robe and sandal movies.
Despite the popularity of films like The Greatest Story Ever Told and Cecil B. DeMille's 10 Commandments, Peluso says it took a 2004 blockbuster to wake up Hollywood to the idea of bringing faith into the contemporary drama space.
It took some creative people that started to be able to tell dramatic contemporary stories in a way that had themes that were accessible to kind of the unchurched. And while those things were kind of bubbling up, Mel Gibson released The Passion of the Christ. And what happened was it was such a massive success that all the Hollywood studios, they had to pay attention.
A decade later, other independent projects further exposed the power of the faith audience. PureFlix co-founder Michael Scott remembers the risk of taking God's Not Dead to theaters.
We basically had to raise $5 million to take out God's Not Dead. We spent a little over $1 million on the film. We're in $6 million. That's a lot of money still, you know? And I'm thinking down on my hands and knees, just praying to God, saying, I hope the film makes in total $6 million.
And as history shows, the Lord answered that prayer tenfold.
Opening weekend, God had a different thing and did almost $10 million and went on to do $60 million. And I think that was a catalyst that allowed us to take that, launch the streaming company, do more theatrical films, put more product into the marketplace, and it was just a wonderful thing that took place.
Even more wonder what happened after Sony purchased PureFlix, followed by a merger with the TV network Great American Family. Given the overall growth in major studio appeal and faith content, a key question persists. What happens next?
One thing that can happen, and I think it will happen, is the studios can put more money into these Christian films. The average budget for a studio film is advertising is $50 million, and the average budget for a studio release of a Christian film like Jesus Revolution is only $10 million.
Dr. Baer says bigger budgets can lead to increased awareness in larger audiences, but only if studio executives envision a pattern of success with Christian movies.
Hollywood follows these trends. I do believe that you can follow the trends and see what happens.
While box office success is usually the gold at the end of the rainbow for Hollywood studios, Scott believes there's a more profound and eternal purpose for faith films.
I think our soul and our spirit craves something to be inspired, hope, redemption. And I say that our content, we can be the light in the darkness. You're in a totally dark room, you light one single match and it chases away the darkness. We can be that single match with a piece of content that will light up your heart, your soul. And I think it'll be is what people crave ultimately.
And actress and director Sherry Rigby echoes these sentiments.
I think people really they're hungry for family values again. They're hungry for substance, redemption, valued stories about men and women. And so I think we have an actual culture that's looking for that. And the beautiful thing is I believe that the Lord has positioned believers in a position so that over these last several years that we've seen this industry come up, we're sharpening our skills.
We're likely to see a further expansion into new types of faith content. While we wait for that dynamic to unfold, one reality remains clear. The audience showing up is the main ingredient for future success. Billy Hollowell, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Billy. Well, some sad news to report. A radio and entertainment staple in America for decades, CBN's Scott Ross has passed away. A reporter, a host, and fixture at the network since the early days, Scott is well known to 700 Club viewers for his always entertaining, in-depth interviews with Hollywood stars, musicians, and public figures.
Obedience is a big word.
Obedience.
Obedience. Yeah, I remember someone saying to me once, it costs you to obey God. It costs you more not to.
Yes. Yes.
Before coming to the Christian Broadcasting Network, he was a major player in New York City's radio scene, earning him 5 Billboard awards. But his accolades were nothing to him without his faith. Scott is survived by his wife, Nedra Talley Ross, of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame R&B female group, the Ronettes. The two were married for more than 50 years and had 4 kids. They said the secret to their happy lives was the transformation of praying together daily. And we'll be back with more Faith Nation right after this. Finally tonight, as wildfires burn through the Hawaiian island of Maui, the community is coming together to help those in need. A local school turned its campus into an aid center where families, some of whom have lost their own homes and belongings, are pitching in and sorting through donations. Everything from clothing to food to baby supplies is collected and distributed to the victims of the fire. And just a reminder, to see how you can help those suffering due to the Maui wildfire, visit CBN's Operation Blessing at ob.org. Well, we thank you so much for watching. As always, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow.